My name is Linda Lay, and I'm a vascular surgeon at the Houston Methodist DeBakey Heart and Vascular Institute, and this is the CV Sorority Sisters in Surgery webcast, a series looking at topics that are important to women in surgery. Today, our focus will be on the concept of female surgeons who, in mid-career, have chosen to go back and obtain additional advanced degrees or have found different pathways in their careers. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Palma Shaw, who's a professor of surgery at Upstate Medical Center in Syracuse, New York. This is a live event, so if you have any questions, please text DeBakey to 37607 or online pollev.com/DeBakey for your questions.
Thank you, Linda. I'd like to introduce our panelists. We're really honored to have these prestigious women here today. They're truly leaders in their field. I have great admiration for every single one of them in a special way. They've all been mentors to me and given me support, as they have to many other women in our specialty. And I'm just so grateful that they could make the effort to be here today. Some are on call, some are trying to operate, and it's just really great, and I'm so pleased. I'd like to introduce first Dr. Ruth Bush, who additionally has her law degree as well as a degree in Masters of Public Health. She is an Associate Dean of the Medical Education and Professor of Surgery at the University of Houston College of Medicine and a vascular surgeon at the Central Texas Veterans Administration Hospital. Dr. Ourania Preventza, who has her Executive Masters of Business Administration from the Brandeis University, and she is a cardiothoracic surgeon at the Texas Heart Institute, a professor of surgery, and the president-elect for the International Society for Endovascular Specialists. Dr. Jean Starr, who is a professor of surgery, a vascular surgeon at the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center, and the APV Medical Safety Officer for Medtronic Incorporated. And finally, Dr. Karen Wu, who recently completed her PhD in health policy and is an associate professor of surgery and vascular surgeon at the UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles, California. Welcome, all of you.
Again, I want to thank y'all for taking your time out of your busy days to join us today on this webcast. And, it's really important that we women reach out to other women to give them advice and just give them somebody to show that we're all kind of in the same boat. So questions for all of you guys. How did you manage your time commitment to obtain your degree or pursue the alternative pathway and continue practicing as a vascular surgeon? Ruth, we'll start with you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. So I think that, a lot of people will throw around the word balance, but I think when you're deciding to work full-time and go back to school, which is usually full-time or a full course load, just really does mean you do have to take extra time and you have to find more time. I have to say it is challenging. It was very challenging when I went back and did the public health degree first, and then later in life did the Juris Doctorate. I think you have to have a good support system, and you have to be a good time manager. You have to figure out a system that works for you, and do not get behind. Do not get behind on any assignments, on anything that is due. Similar to somebody who's charting or doing your notes or the rules that we have to follow in the hospital, getting behind and letting those things stack up, I think will make your life not very fun. So just, if you decide to do it, work out a good plan and stick to your plan and stick to your time management plan.
And Karen?
Yeah, so I actually have 2 advanced degrees that I got since I started working as an attending. Palma gave me a little bit too much credit. I'm not quite done yet with this PhD. I still have to defend my dissertation, but I've done everything else. So my first degree was a master's degree. So I got a master's of science in clinical and biomedical investigation. And I was working full time at that time. And I did it as one class a semester for almost 3 years. It's supposed to take 1 year. So obviously I stretched it out a lot, and that's the only way that it was possible. I did problem sets at night and on the weekend, and it's, you know, just as Ruth said, it's a huge commitment, and you have to do it, and you can't get behind. So if you want to finish, you have to resign yourself to doing homework and studying for midterms and final exams and doing group projects with people who just graduated from college. So it's an interesting experience, but if you commit yourself to it, it's really worthwhile. My PhD I am doing as part of a K award that I have from the NIH that protects me 75% of the time for research. So I'm doing the PhD in conjunction with my K award research time. So it's a little bit easier to manage. I'm doing the PhD full time, but because I have that protected time, it's making it easier to manage. So that's my story.
And Jean, what about you? You decided on an alternative pathway along with being a obviously busy vascular surgeon since you're about to operate.
Yeah, so interesting, because I had some of the same plans that some of the other women talked about, and that I thought when I got my kids, you know, to a certain point and I had more time, I would not only learn to play golf with my husband, which I also haven't done, but also go back and get an advanced degree. And I sort of never got around to that. And then, you know, all of a sudden you wake up and you go, oh my gosh, 25 years have passed. I've been in clinical practice 25 years. And, you know, it's not going to be a good time for me to go back and do that. And then I was lucky enough to come into this position in industry, which I guess looking back, I you know, helped to facilitate along the way, which I can talk about later. So I didn't have to spend the extra time. It's more the time management now that I'm in that position. And we can talk about that in a little bit, I think, with some of your other questions.
And Ourania?
Yes, that's an excellent question, Linda. So as surgeons, we are very, in general, we're very task oriented, and we're very focused on getting the job done. So there's no question that it's time commitment. In my case, I had to use my personal time as well as my vacation time. And I went to have the degree at Brandeis in Boston. The degree was 18 months. Twice a year, you have to be there in person, and then the rest of the classes were done in Zoom every other day, usually at night for a few hours, and then every week, every Saturday or every other Saturday for 3-4 hours in the morning. So there's no question that it's time commitment, but when I made my decision to get it done, I just got it done. It just, you know, you just let it happen.
Excellent answers. Y'all are very all so driven and motivated. Very humbling for me.
So I guess we could ask each of you what really drew you to pursue that particular advanced degree. I know you hinted towards each of that, but it's clearly, Ruth, you've done 2 different degrees, and you know, can you explain a little bit what led you in that direction?
Sure. So after completing my fellowship and starting working as an attending at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, I decided to go back and get a Master's of Public Health. I got that degree from University of North Carolina School of Public Health. Similar to Rania, I had to be there twice a year on campus for a week at a time, and the rest was with classmates, with projects, mostly online. I decided to pursue the public health degree because I was interested in comparative effectiveness research, more outcomes research, and the only background I had was a little bit of statistics that we had done, you know, in medical school and maybe as an undergrad. So I wanted more of a broad educational base to be able to understand doing studies from a population health perspective. Rather than just learning the statistical test, really learning the theory around it. And that did allow me to get a K award at that time, which I worked on it wasn't part of my K award, but I worked on the MPH alongside of that K award, which gave me research material to use for my master's thesis. Later, I went back to law school. That was actually about 2010. I graduated in 2013. I decided to go back to law school around 2008, 2009. At that time, I was the ACGME designated institutional official at my institution. I was an associate dean for med-ed as well. And I saw a lot in students and residents not understanding basically how to stay out of trouble with medical malpractice issues, conflicts of interest, security issues, privacy issues, and then what to do if they got into trouble. And I started looking at some different options for offering curricula to the different residency programs as well as students. And at that point, I made the decision to go back and get the degree. Fortunately, as we were talking before, the law schools, when you have an MCAT and an MD, they waived the LSAT, which I was very thankful for. It still was going, for the law degree, it was going back to school full time, taking the full course load while I was still working full time. I have to say that one was very hard. It's a law school is a different way of thinking. It is a different mentality. We're all about outcomes. We're about the diagnosis. We're about what's going to happen at the operation. Lawyers are about the process. And so you have to learn how to argue both sides of a case well, because you have to argue whoever's paying your bill. So regardless of what you think about it, you have to be able to argue it. But that's an aside. But that was sort of my rationale for going back to law school. Now, what I don't remember the last part of your question. What have I done with that?
You're an associate dean now, so you've taken yet another turn in this pathway.
I've been in various positions in the dean's office for about 10 years now, assistant associate deans at both Texas A&M and now at University of Houston. I found that I really enjoy the educational side of medicine. And over the years, I've enjoyed the younger and younger educational side of it, and really enjoyed the medical students and helping find the right candidate who really is bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and walk them through that process to becoming a physician and then matching into their residency. It's challenging. I have to say that I really love it, and I'm so excited about we're having our inaugural class this summer. And in a pandemic, we're still going to launch a College of Medicine.
Thank you, Ruth. You're well known to be an outstanding educator, and I really just want you to know that. So Karen, with respect to your vascular background, vascular surgical training, and then the path you've taken with your research, what about your vascular surgical background has directed you to this particular focus in your degree?
So I didn't realize that I really liked doing research until I was a trainee, like well into my training and into my fellowship. And when I became an attending, I realized that I wanted to do research as part of my career. And I wanted to do really good research. Like I wanted to try to do the best quality research that I could. And I didn't feel like I had the skills for that. So that's what drove me to get my initial master's degree, which was probably one of the best things that I ever did, given, you know, my goals of wanting to do research as a career. It really allows me to like talk to analysts and statisticians in their language, and it allows me to have intelligent interactions with them and really like contribute to that discussion rather than like having a one-sided interaction where they tell me what's best to do. And I feel like that, you know, and definitely at that time, like right when I got the degree, it definitely helped to give me credibility. So like when I walked into somebody's office that I wanted to collaborate with or work with me on a project, and I explained to them, you know, I got this degree and I can sort of speak this language, I can tell that it's a very different interaction than when I kind of like didn't know anything. And I think that that's a really key point when you're just sort of starting out and maybe you don't have a reputation yet, or you don't have that much credibility, and you're looking for people to work with you and for people to invest. Because every time somebody collaborates with you, they have to invest something in you. They have to give you a little bit of their time or their resources or something, and they have to see that you're worth investing in. And I struggled with that for many years when I first started out. And I think like as I add each one of these little things, like I added my master's degree, I added my K award, like now it's really easy to get people to collaborate with me. So that has helped a lot. And I would say that if that's part of your goal, is just to learn how to speak those people's language, and that way they see you more as an equal rather than somebody they kind of have to help and drag out of the mud.
That's great. Well, Karen, you're well known for your research and what you've contributed to our society and our field, and I really applaud you for all that. Jean, I wanted to ask you, you know, your reputation as an outstanding surgeon technically and educator, having been a program director for a long time and a mom and a wife and juggling all of these things. What other aspects of your career have led you to this position that you feel it all kind of adds up? You know, like you didn't really know you were going to do it, but looking back, do you think that it led to that?
Yeah, it sort of snuck up on me because, you know, like I said, I've been in practice for 25 years, and by this time you start to think, okay, what's going to be the next step? And you know, I really was just sort of letting the cards lie. I enjoy clinical work. I enjoy teaching, as you know. Not as big of a researcher, obviously, but I was involved in a lot of goings around the societies and around the hospital. So I really was enjoying it and really wasn't, you know, planning any change. And over the years, though, I would say I've always enjoyed interacting with people from industry, various industries, to the point where one day I was sitting with my husband, and actually his buddy was sitting there who's totally in a different field in finance. And I said, you know, what is it that you do all day? Because I just don't, not that I didn't respect what he did or I just didn't understand it. And I'm dying to know what other people do during their work. And so it sort of has always led me to thinking, even with industry, it's like, how do these products get here? You know, a lot of us take it for granted that these products just end up on our shelves, sort of like masks, right? Whoever thought, you know, you would have been worrying about where your next mask comes from, you know? And so that sort of led me to doing cooperative work with industry when it came time for clinical trials, for educational sessions. And I worked with several companies over time, and I just really enjoyed it. And I think the respect that I've had going both ways. So, you know, I think too, a lot of people maybe don't give as much respect to reps from the company. You know, I think they sometimes get taken for granted. And I always respected those people for what they did, because a lot of times they give up their time the same way that we do. So that sort of blossomed into, you know, an invitation to come think about joining industry, which I was really very taken aback the day that I got, you know, the phone call. And then I met with my future boss at the time, and it just sort of fell in place, because in fact, the first few conversations were very much, gosh, I'm flattered. This is wonderful. You've thought of me, but I can't do this. I can't leave an academic. How could I go academic part-time? You know, and it did take a lot of work. It took about 6 months or so to really work it out so that I could be sure I was giving them what they need and that I was getting what I need, let alone the education involved in it. I've learned so much now about medical safety and about clinical trials more than I knew before. So it's really been very refreshing to me. I never thought I would have found something so refreshing at 25 years in, but I'm really very thankful that I have both, that I can balance both.
Well, thank you, Jean. I think that the relationship we have with industry is critical to moving forward and innovation in vascular and endovascular surgery. So I think it's fabulous that you're really a bridge. You're a bridge helping us understand what the right mix is between industry and vascular surgery. Thank you for that.
Yep.
Ourania, so it's interesting. I mean, you are at one of the top heart and vascular institutes in the world. You're a well-known cardiothoracic surgeon. I remember when I met you working with Ted Dietrich, and you knew that open cardiothoracic surgery may not be just enough, and you committed at least a year to working with Ted at the Arizona Heart, and then you went back and joined Dr. Caselli, and I know you work incredibly hard. And then at some point you decide that you should get your executive MBA, which I'm doing right now, having finished my first semester, and I'm looking at you thinking, why did you do this, and what led you to that point? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, Palma, thank you so much. And both of us, I mean, I think the Brandeis, the MBA actually that you're getting, and I did at Brandeis, I think was one maybe of the best things that I did in addition to work with Ted Dietrich at Arizona Heart. So I love being a surgeon. I love being a cardiac surgeon. I love, do whatever I do. And I love being in the operating room. And the reality is that you really spend years focusing on mastering skills and knowledge that really you need to practice, cardiac surgery or vascular surgery. But the reality is that healthcare today, it's a little more complex industry. And to be really an effective leader, healthcare leader, you really need to have more additional skills. And these skills, typically, you don't really learn in medical schools, and sometimes not even in practice. So to learn this, I think, learning the hospital finance or some of the operational, functions, I think was extremely, imperative to me. And there's no question in my mind that definitely, and the MBA actually was focused on healthcare industry. In addition, was done with another 36 wonderful colleagues. Most of them were senior physicians. So you really learn a lot by even engaging in conversations with others. So it was maybe one of the best things that I have done.
Thank you. Linda, do you want to?
Yeah, so this is a question more for Jean. How do you balance, you were talking about, it took you 6 months to figure out how to work it out between your academic institution, yourself, and industry. How do you manage, any conflicts of interest in that regard? And does your academic institution, did they have a problem with you working for, industry?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it was sort of a dance to figure out even how to do it, because I found that people before me had done it, but had done more the consulting portion of it. So they were still full-time faculty, and I had done the same thing and gotten paid a salary, not a salary, but a remittance basically, for doing a limited consulting. And in fact, when I first started discussing it with my leaders, they sort of thought I was doing the same thing. And I said, no, this is really an employment. So I had to go through, for me, the College of Medicine had to okay it, as did the medical center. So that was the biggest stickler, was the conflict of interest and the, obviously the intellectual property. So I had to agree for both that if something was created on one side, not the other, whose property it was. I had to assure the university that I was not practicing medicine for Medtronic, which I'm not. I am a medical safety officer. And then I had to, have to assure them that when decisions come up for purchasing products, that I will not be involved in the hospital whatsoever. That's been tough, because over the years, that's sort of been my thing at the hospital. I've been director of endovascular services, which had to do with products and stocking and things like that. So I've had to really back away from that and really be more of a silent partner when it comes to products and things like that. So it has been a bit of a dance. I would love to, share more sometime in a different format about how to go about it step by step, because there really was nobody before me that had really done this and continues to balance it.
Right.
So just to let you know, to balance it, I operate all day, Monday, Friday, typically outside of the pandemic, I operate Mondays and Friday. And then Thursdays I have clinic all day. So I basically give Tuesdays and Wednesdays all day to Medtronic. And then if I travel, which is about once a month, then that is goes to Medtronic as well. So it all gets balanced at about 50-50 in the end.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's the physicalities of it. It's been tough with call because it's hard to be on call when I'm on WebEx calls all day with Medtronic because I'm working remotely. So it's a little bit tough to balance that and not be on call on those days. But, I kind of got into a happy medium now, and then the pandemic struck, so we'll have to see what happens when we're all done now too.
Right. And then speaking of balance, Ruth, being an associate dean, I'm sure that's a huge time commitment as well. So how do you balance operating, but also being an associate dean and that administrative workload?
So I think that's a really good question, Linda. I think we are foolish when we think we can do it all and do it all 100%. Then that leads to a lot of the articles that we saw on burnout and people leaving the profession. So I had to make choices early on when the first opportunity came up in the dean's office. It was as an assistant dean position. And I had to talk with my chief long and hard about what my split was going to be. What was I going to give up? Because similar to what Jean's saying, I was going to be on a different campus in a different city for my dean's job, and then practicing, at my VA in one city. So I ratcheted back the amount of larger cases, but I made the decision in 2012, no call. I have not taken call, ladies, since 2012. And I have to say, it is fabulous. It is fabulous not taking call. But it also limits you. You have to give up some of the things that we spent years, 9 years of residency learning how to do. And that was tough. It was tough to give up. It was tough to not feel that I was a part of, things. I never really did the big operations like you're doing, Rania, but, just femdistals, carotids, things like that, you have to give up because I can't be there the next day taking care of the patient, or if something happens. And that wasn't fair to my partners. It wasn't fair to the patient. So I think you just have to make some decisions and choose, when a door opens up, are you going to walk through it? Which path are you going to go down when there's a split in the path? That being said, I still take care of patients. My practice is much, much smaller now. I've got an 80-20 split. It's never right down the middle, similar to you, Jean. I'm doing calls and doing other stuff when I'm at one job or the other, or calling patients or answering, calls from my nurse about things. You have to learn how to combine them and be able to, and we do that very well as surgeons. We compartmentalize very well so we can go from one activity to another. It is one thing skill set that we definitely have. Now I mainly do dialysis access. I do any type of venous work. And, my partners will throw me an angio, throw me an iliac stent every now and then. I get really excited because I get to look at an artery and it's just beautiful. I will help out as the, not the silent partner, because I don't really know how to be silent, Jean, but, the silent person assisting. If they don't have a fellow, or the fellow residents and fellows are off doing something else, or there's an extra case, yes, I am happy to be an assistant. It is great. You get to operate, you get to see things, and then you don't have to take care of the patient or do any of the paperwork afterwards. So that's what I do now. So I still dabble. I still review papers for journals. So I review in venous and arterial alike, and I now review education papers. So you keep abreast of what's going on. I just don't do it every day.
Palma?
Yeah. I wanted to ask, I think some of the women watching would like to know, maybe how did you finance this? Were you able to get scholarships or grants, or did you have to foot the bill yourself over time to achieve these goals and these degrees? I guess, Ruth, you could start off, and then Karen.
I have to say, for my public health degree, that was a job negotiation. Your boss, Linda, that was one of my job negotiation items that I wanted my degree paid for. So I would just take my tuition bill in to travel back and forth to North Carolina. I footed the bill, and then we paid for law school ourselves. I didn't apply for grants or loans or anything like that, but I was also a little bit later in life. And I think I had just finished paying for my student loans. So
Oh my goodness.
here came more tuition bills. But I also know now that, you don't need to have a degree from, the #1 USA Today ranked program, similar to medical school. I may not know where all of you all went, but I know that you're competent physicians and that you're well trained and you're board certified. So I did learn that the name on the diploma doesn't matter as much.
That's excellent. Karen, you said this was part of your K-1. Is that helping support the PhD now, or?
No, so PhDs are a little bit different. In general, PhD students are supported by the university in some fashion. They have lots of different funding mechanisms. So the university is giving me, they call it a fellowship, and they're paying for almost all of it. Wow. And it's pretty typical for PhD students. For my master's degree, the university gave the faculty 4 graduate credits a semester. And so since I was only taking a class a semester, it was free. My master's degree was free. So if you work for a university that has those kinds of benefits, I would highly encourage you to take advantage of them.
That's amazing. Wow. And Rania, what about the EMBA?
That was actually, I finished this like 3 years ago, but at the time I thought that it was better for me if I self-finance. Now, by saying that, so basically I paid out of my own pocket, but by saying that, I know other people in the class that they actually have the institutions pay for. So as Karen and Ruth said, that if you'll be able to have the institution paid for, that's not a bad deal. I just at the time, for me, I thought it was the best thing that I had to do is just to get it done. And that's why I just went on and I just self-finance.
So a question for all of you. What was your biggest struggle throughout this whole process of, the alternative pathway or advanced degree? Ruth?
So I will say my biggest struggle, so two parts to your question, was in law school. That was incredibly time consuming. It was nights, it was all weekend long to get the assignments done. They like to assign a lot of reading in law school and a lot of case studies. So I have to say that was it. And I think that the main drawback was I was so engrossed that I was oblivious to what a toll it took on my family until afterwards. I'm very happy. My husband's very proud. He loves to tell people I went to law school. But it was very hard on him, and he kept a stiff upper lip through the whole thing, but it was only after I finished that we talked about it and how hard it was on him. I think I've already alluded to the fact with, changing careers and doing more educational administrative focus is the hardest thing is giving up what you thought you were going to do for the rest of your life. I thought I was going to be a doctor and a surgeon for the rest of my life. I am a doctor and a surgeon for the rest of my life. I'm just a less operating doctor and surgeon for the rest of my life. So those are the things. I think, though, you make choices, and I've made the right choices for me.
And Karen?
I think the hardest part of getting the degrees is definitely doing the work. Just like Ruth said, when I did my master's degree, I had to learn how to program statistical programs, and it's kind of like learning a computer language, which I had no experience in. Mm-hmm. And like our first assignment, now that I look back on it, was like the best assignment ever. All we had to do was read in the data into the statistical program. And it's literally like 3 lines of code, but I couldn't figure out how to do it for like 2 hours. And I just wanted to cry. And so I think part of it is getting back into that mindset where I think as surgeons, we feel like we're so capable. We know how to do everything. We're so confident. And especially as vascular surgeons, right? We're like the firefighter, hospital, people call you when people are bleeding out, and then you can't figure out how to write 3 lines of code and make it work. So it's a different kind of experience, and that I think was a little bit hard for me to sort of go back to ground zero where I don't really know anything. So that was my experience.
Yeah, we're all very type A and do not like to feel like we failed at all. So, and Jean, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think it was, like I mentioned before, the decision to actually do it. It's really tough. I like Ruth, I thought I was going to live and die a surgeon in the operating room, not till I was 90, but I mean, I figured I would operate until the day I was going to retire, every day, all day, and take care of patients. And that's why at the beginning when I got the phone call, I'm like, no, I can't do this. This is nice, but I can't do this. And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, well, why can't I? I've always thought about it. Why wouldn't I make the transition? Why wouldn't I give it a chance? So it was a tough decision, number one, to do something totally different than you thought you were going to be doing and that you anticipated. And then I think for me, the other part was learning about medical safety. It's a whole nother world out there. And really, I'm just now starting. I've been there since last July. And I'm just now starting to investigate if there's any training. There's a lot of medical safety training for people in hospitals and physicians and administrators. There's not much for people in industry. So I'm sort of starting to investigate some of that. Luckily, there are some physicians, obviously at Medtronic, who are medical directors and medical safety officers also. So we have a little bit of a connection that I can start to learn from them. But I think it's learning about medical safety. I've learned a lot from one of the nurses who I work with. And she and I are the medical safety folks for the aortic, peripheral, and venous division. And I just, you learn a lot along the way. You do your computer-based learning, and it's very interesting to start to deal with engineers and see how their minds think and understand the regulatory aspects of some of that. I still know, pretty much a fraction of what I'm going to ultimately need to know. So a little more learning by the seat of the pants, but I have the utmost respect, and I think you women amaze me what you've gone through and what you've done to get to this point. So I really have a lot of respect for what you guys are all doing and the time you've spent.
And lastly, Ourania.
Thanks, Linda. So as you alluded in the beginning, is that this was done while we have a full-time job. That was not done just out of the school, that we're not working. So we have the full time, to go to classes, read, do the assignments, etc. So I'm really part of a very busy clinical, practice, and we do operate like non-stop, as most of, the people know. So that was the time commitment. That was, I think, the hardest thing for me. But if you see that it's not really a struggle, but it's a fun, I think this is make it like easier. And for me, really like doing that MBA and going to classes, and even like twice a year that we had to go there was awesome. But also during the Zoom online to just like see the other people, talk to with different problems. I think that was really fun, and the fun was really made it easy and basically feasible.
Thanks, everyone. Palma, I think our last question, and we have a few questions to go through with the live text online stream.
I just lastly wanted to ask each of the panelists, now that you've done this and it's there, how do you envision utilizing this in your career going forward? Do you have a set plan, or are you still trying to figure it out, or what can you tell the audience? Ruth?
Sure. I am quite sure that I have spoken at many of your institutions about medical malpractice, negligence, defining some terms. I love that. I love sharing my knowledge. I'm not a lawyer, but I understand. I get to review some contracts for some of the residents who are thinking about their first jobs. I teach in the law school at University of Houston in a bioethics course to give the medical side of it. And so I think for me, it's about the educational aspect and being able to use the degrees for what I planned to do, whether it's with the public health and reviewing articles or looking at studies, or with my law degree and now providing more education. So I am doing exactly what I want to be doing, and it's wonderful.
Karen?
Well, I use my skills that I learned from these degrees every day. That was probably one of the most exciting things about that master's degree, was like almost every day, every time I went to class and learned something new, I could apply it to the research that I was doing. And that was really fun. The other thing that I really enjoy doing is working with residents. So working with residents and fellows and medical students and even undergrad students who want to do research. I work with them a lot and walk them through, how to design a study, how to really think about how to do research, and I can sort of employ these advanced research skills that I've obtained to help them do projects. And that part I think is really fun too. So there isn't anything wasted about the degrees that I've gotten. So I'm very satisfied.
Jean, do you think you may move more towards industry or remain clinical? How do you feel?
Yeah, I think I would miss the clinical to not be here, because a lot of what I do is not only medical safety, but it's, sort of an in-house vascular opinion, which seems that I get a lot of questions regarding that. They don't have a lot of physicians at their fingertips. So that, the fact that if I can try to give a general vascular opinion, then I do that. So I don't see myself giving up clinical practice yet, but I also don't see myself remaining in it, to the bitter end. So at some point in time, I'll have to make a hard choice. And I think it will depend what Medtronic has to offer me. And I don't want to do that full time if I'm not totally busy. So, like we all don't like to sit still, obviously. So it would have to be enough reward for me as well, which right now, my time is well spent there, either learning things, like I said, or collaborating with people. It's a fabulous matrix organization, and you get to work with all kinds of people throughout the world, and that's been a new experience for me, that I've never really had that experience of dealing with other cultures and being able to participate and learn about devices and disease states that I really don't know much about. So it's sort of like I'm restarting some of my education. The terminology and the acronyms are endless, and I feel like I'm back in college the first time learning, I don't know, calculus or something, because it's a whole different language to me. So it's never a dull moment, if you ask me. I would hope to move on. The company, it's a great company where people are encouraged to move up and move on depending on what they want to do and what their goal aspirations are. So I think there's a lot of things I could do. I'm still new enough that I have a whole lot of learning to do before I think I can move forward. And, I would love to, on the other end of it, when it comes time for the hospital, I would love to be able to advise people. I've already gotten, various different people who have asked me, anesthesia people, other general surgery people, how did I do it? How do I work with industry? And I don't think there's one solution, but I can try to advise them earlier on the relationship to try to build. It's more relationship building than it is going to somebody and asking for a job. So I'd love to be able to guide people who are also interested.
Sounds really exciting. And you make it seem very exciting. You're so enthusiastic. Rania, people always say, why are you getting your EMBA? And are you going to, what are you going to do with that? And they always say you're going to be in the C-suite. Are you going to be a CMO, a CEO? What are your thoughts about utilizing your EMBA in your career?
I mean, I love to operate. I still love to operate. I'm not ready just to say that I don't want to do heart surgery anymore, because this is really what defines me. And you spend so many years doing it. But there's no question that this really helps you prepare and transition into more management roles as well as leadership roles. And the important thing also here is that really it gives you the opportunity to share conversations with administrators. And in a way, what this does is that really, from one point, protect, and from the other point, also it actually helps the interest of other clinical physicians. And at the same time, one thing that you realize is that you can be an excellent and busy clinical physician. This does not necessarily translate to be an effective clinical leader. As a surgeon, it's extremely important the immediate results. What you see right now, we're going to surgery, we need to see great results. But as a clinical leader, you have to focus a little not only on the immediate, that usually you don't see it, but more on the midterm results, long-term results. Plus, you try to, and what you learn is more to collaborate among different disciplines and how to navigate and how to really share these responsibilities and at the same time the triumph. So it's not that, as a surgeon, you really expect compliance, but as a skillful leader, you don't have a very well-defined problem, and usually, you really try to collaborate and see what's going on and try to figure it out. It's most of the times it's like a messy situation that you try to find an end to it. So it's a little different, and I think it's exciting to know, to learn more things, expand what you learn, and just try to get more into management roles and leadership roles.
Thank you.
So we have about 10 minutes left, and we actually have a bunch of questions coming in. I'm going to summarize a few of the questions. Many viewers are actually asking the panel, when do you think is a good time to get the second degree? Do you think in med school, or using your dedicated research time in surgery residency programs to obtain the second degree? Or would you have a few years of experience under your belt before obtaining your advanced degree? Ruth, you want to start?
Sure. As I was telling some of you all before we started, I was completely oblivious to anything called a dual degree program when I was going through medical school. I didn't even think about it. I think that we talk to students and candidates more about these opportunities now, whether it's an MD MBA, MD MPH, MD PhD, or MD JD. They all do exist. And I think if it's something that a student is thinking about, the tracks when you're early on, give dual credits for some courses so that you shrink down the amount of time that you actually spend in a degree, usually by maybe 1 year. And so I think if it's something that a student's thinking about, I would recommend, and actually I do recommend, that they go ahead and do it at the same time. I think it does get a little bit more challenging when you get into practice and you're paying back loans, or you're wanting to buy a house, or you're wanting to have a baby. I do think that surgeons are used to multitasking, and we're really good at this. And so I don't doubt that anyone who wants to do it can do it. I think that if you are thinking about it early on, just do it. Go ahead and do it. Reach out to any one of us. Sorry, my dog is yapping in the background. And I think everyone would encourage you to do the same.
So one of the questions actually, as you're talking about this, how do you find out about these residency programs that offer dual paths? You know, like for example, MPH, MD, what you talked about, MD, JD. How do you get a mentor in doing that and finding out what programs have those options?
So it is actually for MBA, it's actually fairly easy. There's a Program Directors Association for MBA programs, but the AAMC website. So what I recommend to folks is usually go to one of your counselors, or when you're applying to medical schools, you can reach out and ask them. They may refer you to the AAMC website. Most students are familiar with that, and they should be able to find out what schools have what programs. Or if you're applying to that medical school, you can look on their admissions website, and they will list all of the various dual degree programs that they do offer.
Thanks, Ruth. Anyone else on the panel have opinions on whether to do it early in med school or residency or wait?
I can say, Linda, that if you do it in a way, I kind of agree in part with Ruth that if you want to do it in a medical school, I think there is this dual programs that it's not going to be a bad idea. Maybe it's going to be a great idea. Gives you a different perspective of looking, moving forward. But I think if you decide to go to residency, and you really decide to go to, if this is medical residency, but we're talking about surgery now. If you really decide to go to surgical residency, you really have to concentrate and learn. I mean, you have X amount of time, and this means 4, 5, 6 years to learn how to operate. And really, you have to learn how to operate and take care of patients. I mean, all these degrees are there, but medical school, there is some theory, there is some classes, so I think that will be a good way to do it. But during residency, I really think that you have, especially on the clinical years, when you really do the clinical years, you have to concentrate, put the time on, and learn how to operate. Mm-hmm. At least if I'm the person on the table, you better really know how to open my heart, you really know how to open, my femoral artery or whatever, you do. Then after you master these skills and you move on, then you have to decide what you want to do in your life. So after a few years, when you are actually at a time where a little more mature and know what you want to do, I think there is plenty of time to do anything you want. The other question will be with the research years. I mean, actually, I can take that. Potentially, instead of doing a traditional research year, you can actually do that MBA, or you can do that Master of Public Health. You can use that 1 or 2 years to do that. That will be a good way of doing it. But I wouldn't really recommend somebody to take away from the clinical years and the clinical surgery to do these extra degrees.
Can I say 2 things?
Yes.
So I totally agree with Rania, what you said at the end there. We have programs in the country, obviously general surgery programs, where you can do both. Actually, our program does that. You can do 1, 2, 3 years. You can do an MBA. No one's gotten a law degree, but you can. Masters of Public Health, like you said. So if you can find it during your residency when it's a supported program, it's a lot easier than trying to create it yourself. And I agree, you have to have dedicated time. But our residents who do that, I think, are much more mature. I think they appreciate the time that they've been given to be able to do that, and they really enjoy it. The other thing that I want to say when you ask, gosh, what time in your life should you do it? It's sort of like, in my mind, it's sort of like having children. There's never a right time, especially as female surgeons. We make decisions. Do we have children during residency? Do we do it during our early years? Do we wait till later and defer? But there's never a right time for everybody. So, and it's never, if you keep waiting for that next moment, then you may miss your moment. So I would say if it hits you that you're thinking about it, then you ought to go ahead and do it and grab the bull by the horns like these women have.
Karen, thoughts?
I will say that doing it later, after I had already kind of figured out what I wanted to do. If you know me, my shtick is dialysis access. And so I had already known that was what I wanted to do. And so when I was going through my classes, I could think like specifically, how was I going to apply these skills to what I'm doing right now? And my projects, like the projects that I was assigned to do, I could use the stuff that I was actually doing in real life as my projects. And so that I thought was kind of a cool thing about doing it later on. But I agree, if you want to do it and you have you have the time, you should just do it. There is no right time. So just like Jean said, there's no right time. But that was one advantage of doing it the way I did it.
Palma, last thoughts before we wrap up, because I know you're going through your MBA right now.
Right. Yeah. I agree with everything that's been said. I think, Evan Lipsitz encouraged me to do this. He's a friend of mine and a chief of vascular surgery at Maimonides, and then I found out Ourania did it, and then Alec Farber's done it. And I said, you know what, I guess I can do it too. Like, I can do this, right? I'm busy, and I have 2 children, and I'm always juggling a lot of committee work, and I don't know how to say no. I mean, it's always something on my to-do list, but I really, really am loving it. It's a ton of work, but I really love, like, in this whole COVID environment, all we're talking about is like things related to COVID and operations management and the finances. And I hear all these other people's perspectives from all different disciplines all over the country and even in the world. It's an international EMBA. So I'm glad I'm doing it. There is never a right time. If you just really like a challenge and you're happier being challenged than not, then you do whatever, draws you in that direction. So.
Great. Well, I want to thank everyone for taking the time out today. A great panel. Seems like a lot of people were watching with lots of questions, great advice, and I hope we see you guys again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a good night.
See you next time.